Welcome to Farsight's cryptocurrency project, where we use remote viewing to forecast cryptocurrency prices for established coins over a period of 3 months. Now, this video contains a results analysis of how well we did predicting the behavior of Litecoin from June 15th through September 15th, 2018. And for those of you who are new to this, remote viewing is a mental process that allows for the transfer of information across time and space. I'm Courtney Brown, director of the Farsight Institute, where we conduct experiments that use remote viewing in a large variety of settings and across a great many topics. Now, remote viewing was originally developed by the United States military and used for espionage purposes. But Farsight is civilian, and we use remote viewing for scientific investigations and for exploration. It is almost unimaginably difficult and complicated to predict digital information using remote viewing, and this is due to the nature of the physics involved. But there have been advances in our understanding of the phenomenon, and we now believe that we have the capability to do just that, using a new experimental design that resolves many of the issues encountered in past research. Also, we normally publish a new 3-month forecast when we publish the results analysis, such as this one, around the 15th of each month. But this month, September 2018, we are holding off publishing our next 3-month forecast for 1 month to allow us to catch up with some of our other work involving our mysteries projects, our time cross show, and our Seco project. So our next 3-month cryptocurrency forecast will be released in mid-October 2018. Now, with regard to our other projects, our Time Cross show is a monthly series that comes out at the end of each month, where you can see our remote viewers working and resolving mysteries and headline backstories that are current in the news or which have been a puzzle for a long time. Now, that show is free on YouTube, and it is not only entertaining, but it is important for you to watch since it allows you to see how our remote viewers work totally blind on verifiable targets. In 2 weeks, at the end of September, you will see our remote viewers resolve a fascinating puzzle of a very strange anomaly that is located in the middle of Antarctica and easily visible using Google Earth. That's right. On September 30th, you will find out what it is, or actually what is buried there that governmental operatives have so earnestly been digging up and studying. September 30th, Time Cross. Now, our Seco project involves 5-year forecasts for recently created cryptocurrencies, or ICOs. And many investors are hugely interested in those cryptocurrencies since there is so much potential for extraordinary earnings when those currencies can be obtained cheaply before they rise in price. The trick is finding the new cryptocurrencies that will survive and become established, like Bitcoin and Ethereum are today, and that is what our Seco project is all about. Now, let's get into how well we did forecasting the prices of Litecoin from the 15th of June through the 15th of September 2018. And as you will soon see, we did really well. We could have been more clear in one aspect of our forecast, which I will point out to you, but overall, this forecast demonstrates clearly what we are capable of doing using remote viewing. Now, Litecoin is related to Bitcoin, where the major difference is that Litecoin is structured such that transactions can occur more quickly, and the possibility of using Litecoin for retail purchases on a large scale is quite real. But first, we begin with our disclaimer. No one at Farsight is a licensed financial advisor, so anything that anyone at Farsight does that relates to using remote viewing to predict financial or economic outcomes of any type, including the selling prices of cryptocurrencies, is done for entertainment and educational purposes only. Everyone doing investments are doing so at their own risk. These are experiments in remote viewing, and there are no guarantees or warranties being made, either explicit or implied. Nonetheless, these efforts are truly interesting on a grand scale, and I personally believe that after we do this for a while, it will be hard for anyone to ignore the reality of remote viewing. Let me describe a bit about how our 3-month forecasts work. With our new experimental design, our remote viewers perceive targets, which are places that are designed using CGI software. Now, the targets do not exist at the time that the remote viewers do their work, but the rules for creating the targets based on future high and low price values of a cryptocurrency do exist, and we can examine the remote viewing data to determine how those rules will be applied in the future to create the targets. And using this method, we can predict estimates for the high and low values of a particular currency, as well as the level of sudden volatility surrounding those peaks and lows. We will soon be publishing a special educational video detailing how all of this is done. But meanwhile, follow the results and the overview of our methods and evaluate the experiment based on the accuracy of our outcomes. So on June 15th, Litecoin was selling for approximately $101 per coin. And at the time we published our forecast on June 15th, it looked like Litecoin had stabilized in price after the run-up in cryptocurrency prices that happened in December 2017. But our forecast said that Litecoin was headed for a steep decline in prices, including some very rapid drops. Now, to be honest, when we published our forecast, even I had a hard time understanding how Litecoin could be headed into such dark pricing territory. But we stuck to our guns, so to speak, and published what we had. Now, you are going to see the entire unedited forecast in just a few minutes in this video. But to demonstrate a point, here is a short clip that is near the end of the forecast where I summarize the bottom line of the forecast. If we compare the high and low price dynamics for Litecoin over this forecast period across all remote viewers, the overall indication is that the downward pressure on the price of Litecoin will dominate. This will be accompanied by one or more sudden movements in lowering the price. The threats to the price of Litecoin will be visible during the times when the high price is established, and there will be no sudden jumps in the upward direction of the price. Rather, the sudden movements will surround the downward direction. So there you have it. In retrospect, everything makes sense, of course. Litecoin continued to decline throughout the forecast period, but it had one brief resurgence in its pricing around the beginning of September, where the price rose from a low of around $52 to a new high of almost $68. So let's get into some of the specifics regarding the pricing, and let me point out a spot where we could have done better with our explanations. Now, with our 3-month forecast, we often have high-risk and low-risk predictions. The low-risk numbers are the ones we normally work with, but in periods of severe volatility in pricing, the high-risk numbers are more appropriate. The high-risk and low-risk predictions are designed to bookend the actual prices of a currency such that the low-risk versions will underestimate the change in pricing, while the high-risk versions will overestimate the change in pricing. So we expect that the actual high and low price values of a currency to reside somewhere in the middle of the low risk and high risk numbers. The low risk values are more conservative and theoretically safer bets. Also, all price changes are expressed in terms of a reference date, which in this case is June 15, 2018, the first day of our forecast period. The price of Litecoin on June 15th was $101, so that price is our reference price, and all predicted prices in our forecast are represented in terms of percentage changes of that price. Now, this is crucial, and this points to an area where we could have done a better job explaining the process in our Litecoin forecast, which again I will point out in a bit. But to explain the general issue, this does not mean that the forecast percentage predictions will always start at $101 and then go up from that or down from that. It depends on what happens first. If the drop happens first, then that would be a drop from the $101 value. But when the rise happens afterwards, then the rise will begin at the low value and move upward. Using a simple example, let us say that the reference price is $100 and we are expecting a 25% drop and a 20% rise. Let's now say that the drop happens first. Now that would mean that we would be predicting the price to go down to $75, which is a 25% drop, and the percentage amount comes from the $100 reference price. Now the 20% rise would start from the low value, so the predicted high price would then be $75 plus $20 or $95, which is the low price plus 20% of the reference price of $100. It is possible that some people may have thought that the predicted high for our fictitious example would be $120, even if the low price happened first, which is the reference price of $100 plus the percentage rise. But if you do that, then the rise from the low price to the high price would be $45, which would be a 45% increase, and that was not the prediction. The prediction was for a 25% decrease and a 20% rise, not a 45% increase. But if the high price happens first, then indeed we would expect a $120 high price, which would be the reference price of $100 plus the 20% gain. The predicted decline in price would then start from the $120 value, assuming that the high happens first and the decline follows. Again, this is just a fictitious example based on simple numbers, but the principle is the same for all of our 3-month forecasts. Now, in terms of real numbers for Litecoin during the June 15th through September 15th forecast period, and using the low-risk prediction numbers, the low price was predicted to drop 24%, together with predicted moderate to severe sudden volatility in the low price. Again, we predicted the moderate to severe sudden volatility and pricing declines, which actually happened, so the high-risk predictions were important to include in the forecast, even though we normally focus more on the low-risk numbers. And again, you calculate all percentages based on the price on the reference date, which was June 15th. Now, the price on June 15th was $101, so 24% from that would be $77. The actual low price dropped to $52 on August 14th, a price that was repeated on September 11th and the 12th, and that was a 48% from the June 15th reference price. Now, that 48% drop was almost exactly our predicted high-risk prediction, which was 51%. So this is a good example of when our high-risk predictions come in handy during periods of extreme price volatility. And as expected, the actual drop was in between the high-risk and low-risk estimates. Again, in terms of a point estimate, the low-risk prediction is usually safer. It is structured such that it gets in the neighborhood of the actual price, but tends not to overshoot it. If one tries to hit a price too precisely, one runs the risk of missing it. So our low-risk predictions assume that an investor will miss some of the potential gains, since the prediction will tend to undershoot the actual price change. But when price volatility is more severe, then the high-risk numbers come into play, which is what happened in this case. Now let's discuss the predicted high in the forecast, and this is where we could have explained the process a bit better. Our forecast predicted a low-risk rise of 18% with little or no sudden price volatility to the high price. That is, the predicted volatility was predicted to affect the drop in the price of Litecoin, not the rise. Now, when we make a 3-month forecast, we don't know for sure whether the low price will happen before the high price or whether the high price will happen first, even though we do publish timing expectations. So from the perspective of making a 3-month forecast and looking forward, we have to base our predicted low and high prices based on an internally consistent basis. That is, if the low price happens first, we have to predict the subsequent high price starting from the predicted low price, not the actual low price. But investors have the luxury of looking at the actual prices on a day-by-day basis to see what the low and high prices actually turn out to be, which again is something that we cannot do at the beginning of the forecast period. So, from the beginning of our forecast period, an internally consistent estimate of the predicted high price, assuming the low price happens first, would be to take our predicted low price of $77 and add 18% of the reference date price of $101, and this would give a low-risk predicted high price of $95. Now, the actual high price for Litecoin was $68 on September 4th. So our low-risk price prediction overshot the actual price by $27. But given that we also predicted moderate to severe price volatility with respect to the drop in Litecoin prices, and given the fact that the severe price volatility did in fact happen, investors would have been wise to make a high price prediction based on the actual low price rather than our predicted low price. Again, this is not something that we at Farsight can do in the beginning of our forecast period, since we do not know the actual low prices in advance. So our preferred method from the beginning of the forecast period is to only use our predicted prices when calculating the highs and the lows. But we give full information in our forecasts so investors can deviate from our standard procedures when volatility conditions become clear. So if you make the high price prediction based on a rise from the actual low price rather than the predicted low price, that would yield a predicted high price of $52 plus $18, which is $70, which is very close to the actual high price of $68, which happened on September 4th. So our forecast for Litecoin, especially the prediction of a significant drop in prices with moments of sudden price volatility, was spot on. Our predicted high and low prices were reasonable. But where could we have done better? We could have better explained how the high and low prices are calculated depending on whether the low or high price happens first during the forecast period. This is something we have corrected in more recent forecasts. The problem was with the language that we used. More specifically, listen to this short clip from the original Litecoin forecast. Based on these data, if one was to buy low and sell high, a relatively conservative strategy would be to consider buying once the Litecoin price drops to around 24% of its value obtained on June 15th and sell once the value rises to around 18% higher than its June 15th value. Care should be taken to observe rapid price changes affecting the low price. Our data suggest that will happen. You see, the percentages are always based on the price of the coin that occurs on the price reference date, and that is what I was referring to in this clip. But I did not explain fully that the predicted price would be calculated from whatever extreme price happens first. All the predictions do not start from the price on the price reference date. We use the price reference date only to calculate the percentages, but we add or subtract those percentages to the predicted low or high prices depending on which happens first. Again, we have made this more clear in our more recent forecasts. So, overall, our Litecoin forecast was really good. We predicted an unexpected downturn in prices with moderate to severe volatility, and that is exactly what happened. When the prices finally rose, we were not far off. And as always, when things need improvement, such as with the precise language that we use to describe the results and how to use them, we are upfront about this and make improvements on a continual basis. That's not bad for something that has never been done before. These forecasts are really hard for us to make, which is why you don't see others doing what we do. And they are also a bit complicated. But that is the nature of the beast. At least we get the results, and our accuracy is quite good. We also let you monitor the skill and accuracy of our remote viewers with our other projects, including our monthly Time Cross project. Our viewers have trained for years, full-time, and they are constantly honing their skills in public projects using fully verifiable targets. I hope you appreciate the unique nature of what we do. You can't get this anywhere else, and you are on the front lines of a revolution in thought that will one day consume our civilization, hopefully soon. That is what we are working toward, and you are helping to bring that day closer by watching what we do. Now, let me show you the full and unedited Litecoin forecast that was published mid-June 2018. We publish this now for free on YouTube so that a public record of the forecast can be made for all to see. Again, we do these forecasts monthly. So if you are new to remote viewing, you might want to check back with us regularly. Our next 3-month forecast will be released on the 15th of October 2018. Also, remember to watch our other projects, including our free and incredibly interesting Time Cross project, where we will explain to you an incredible anomaly in Antarctica at the end of September, something that you will not want to miss. And here is our original and unedited 3-month Litecoin forecast that was published in June 2018. Welcome to one of the most interesting projects ever, an experiment and demonstration of using something known as remote viewing to predict certain digital information accurately over a forecast period of 3 months. Remote viewing is a mental process that allows for the transfer of information across time and space. I'm Courtney Brown, director of the Farsight Institute, where we conduct experiments that use remote viewing in a large variety of settings and across a great many topics. Remote viewing was originally developed by the United States military and used for espionage purposes, but Farsight is civilian, and we use remote viewing for scientific investigations and for exploration. Predicting digital information has always been a serious challenge for remote viewing, and this is due to the nature of the physics involved. But there have been advances in our understanding of the phenomenon, and now we believe we have the capability to do just that using a new experimental design that resolves many of the issues encountered in past research. So what you are watching now is part of a predictive experiment that involves perceiving the high and low selling prices of a cryptocurrency over a 3-month period. Beginning with this report, we are also adding a new predictive element involving the potential for sudden volatility or change in the currency's price. The currency that is the focus of this particular report is Litecoin. Litecoin is related to Bitcoin, where the major difference is that Litecoin is structured such that transactions can occur more quickly, and the possibility of using Litecoin for retail purchases on a large scale is quite real. We are publishing new forecasts each month, and each one has a set forecast period. But as always, we begin with a disclaimer. No one at Farsight is a licensed financial advisor, so anything that anyone at Farsight does that relates to using remote viewing to predict financial or economic outcomes of any type, including the selling prices of cryptocurrencies, is done for entertainment and educational purposes only. Everyone doing investments are doing so at their own risk. These are experiments in remote viewing, and there are no guarantees being made, either explicit or implied. Nonetheless, these efforts are truly interesting on a grand scale, and I personally believe that after we do this for a while, it will be hard for anyone to ignore the reality of remote viewing. We are using a brand new experimental design that is crafted to avoid the problems typically encountered when using remote viewing with associative remote viewing to predict digital information. We do not do associative remote viewing at Farsight because of the faulty nature of that experimental design, a topic which I have discussed at length elsewhere. Basically, with our new experimental design, our remote viewers perceive targets, which are places that are designed using CGI software. The targets do not exist at the time that the remote viewers do their work, but the rules for creating the targets based on future high and low values of a cryptocurrency do exist, and we can examine the remote viewing data to determine how those rules will be applied in the future to create the targets. Using this method, we can predict estimates for the high and low values of a particular currency, as well as the level of sudden volatility surrounding those peaks and lows. If this sounds complicated, just don't worry about the specifics of the process. Rather, follow the results and evaluate the experiment based on the accuracy of the outcomes. For this forecast using Litecoin, we have a 3-month forecast window. If hypothetical investors were using remote viewing data to base their buy and sell decisions with respect to a specific coin, the idea would be to use the predictive information to know when to buy and sell, as well as when to be alert for sudden changes in the prices of a currency that may occur. As with all investments, one buys when the prices are low and sells when the prices are high. So with a 3-month forecast, where one has an idea of what the high and low prices will be, then one would wait for those high and low prices to happen and then buy and sell accordingly. With this experiment using Litecoin, we are offering both high-risk and low-risk estimates for the high and low prices. In time, we will layer into this additional statistical information that will allow us to create confidence intervals around those point estimates. The high-risk values are just that, values that an investor would use that are based on the most extreme price values that could come out of our data. The low-risk values are more conservative and theoretically safer bets. Since we have two prices that we want to predict, a high and a low price for Litecoin, we have two targets. You will notice that the remote viewers do not always describe the same scene. This is part of the experimental design. The rules that we use to evaluate the data are the same for all remote viewers, but they can perceive different scenes in their sessions. So there is no need for the viewers to have a lot of overlap in terms of what they see in their sessions. The overlap occurs in the interpretation of their data. Beginning with Melina Hall, then Princess Janae, and then Aziz Brown, here are the perceptual data for target 2A. Again, these data correspond to the high price of Litecoin over the 3-month period from the 15th of June 2018 to the 15th of September 2018.
We have two targets, currency 2A and currency 2B. Starting with currency 2A. So I get this flat land, a lot of natural environment, dirt, sand, two structures, one wide and another one is taller than the other structure. So I have a wide structure and a tall structure. They're spaced out, but they're together at the same time. The land is very, very natural. Dirt, sand. There's a road in the distance. Subjects outside this structure. Both structures, indeed. The city. There is a city. It's in the distance. Not too far from these two structures. I'm getting peaks around, so a lot of large mountain peaks, cliffs, kind of sort of like around these two structures. A lot of surface structures, vehicles. I'm getting back and forth movement with trucks and other vehicles, and inside the structure there are subjects, and I'm getting this office feel inside. So inside structure, I'm getting subjects in casual and business attire. There's a lot of subjects dressed like this as well, and a lot of other structures that's in the regular casual wear, and some are in other different type of uniform that's cover full body. And this structure, this is the building that is tall. So outside of the structure, so I'm getting these two structures side by side, but kind of spaced out in between, and one is taller, one is wider, and the peaks are behind and in the distance, and also kind of close as well. Everything feels like in like a cul-de-sac type of areas, like everything is closed in, but as soon as you leave or out, there's a road. There's a road in front of this, and there's also a gated area. So therefore I'm getting more subjects inside the structure, a lot of activity around. Far as the land, there is water near, and there is a road leaving outside of this structure, which is also gated. There is also a cliff nearby the roads and water below and in the distance. And that is all I have for currency 2A.
So this is currency 2, target A. Right now I have 2 or 3 wide structures. They're not clustered together, but they're rather spread out. They have rounded or non-angular tops. So I definitely noticed that one of them is carved here, and a few of them they have a slight curve, but more rounded, squared off tops. I see a lot of large land, green land, water. Also, their lands have cracks in them, and I see water flowing through the cracks, through the areas where there is no closed land. There's foliage and surrounding structures. There's foliage surrounding the structures. I see no subjects in the structures. Definitely extensive foliage around the land here. Very few subjects are outside. This is not a city. Also, the land area, there's land without structures. So there's a lot of land here. Then you have a couple of structures. I definitely see 2 or 3 major structures, and there's just open, green, and rocky land. I hear wind sounds. I hear little noises that might just be nature or something that seems like a very natural environment. There's a blend of level topography with steep peaks, and I see water. Again, I definitely see water. There are men and women, but there are very few subjects here.
In this cryptocurrency session, there were 2 main pyramid-like structures. There were 2 main pyramid-like structures. The sky was divided. There was a lot of dark clouds, dark cloud dynamics all over on this pyramid structure, and there was lush green grass that was peppering and pretty much just covering the space in between these smaller, lower level angular structures that were around this pyramid structure. This tall pyramid structure actually had clear skies above it, while the other one had a lot more dirt and spotty grass. The texture here was pale and crusty of the actual pyramid, what over here it was more smooth and solid. And over here there were subjects, but the subjects were very still, lifeless, but standing and very stoically staring off at this structure in the distance that did not have this overhanging cloud cover. There was also other elements perceived. In the distance, there was also this body of water that was wrapping around behind this cloudy structure. And in that body of water, there was a whirlpool. At the bottom of the whirlpool, inside, it seemed like there was this black box at the very bottom of the ocean that was sort of causing this whirlpool-like activity, that was bringing this current that was sort of dragging in, a low current that was sort of dragging in anything that was within the water slowly towards the center of this whirlpool. There was also significant cloud cover, dark cloud cover over this whirlpool-y area, but the source of the dark clouds was definitely over this pyramid that had the spotty structure, spotty subjects, as well as the spotty grass on the ground.
Now let's do some analysis for this first target based on these remote viewing data. According to the rules of target creation for this experiment, there are 11 essential elements that can be placed in a target. Now, how many of these elements are actually perceived by the remote viewers tells us how the target will be constructed in the future. And this in turn will be determined by the high price of Litecoin over the 3-month period. We also have other rules that I will not discuss here, which allow us to predict the degree of sudden volatility that will occur over the forecast period. The low-risk numbers discount or ignore the first 3 data elements, since one could argue that most remote viewers are expecting some standard elements for targets, such as a bay surface, structures, things like that. So let's start with the data from Melina Hall. In her session, she perceives 2 structures made of metal and stone materials. They have an office feel with flat tops. One is taller and the other wider. Then Melina perceives subjects inside the structures while no subjects are reported outside of the structures. There is a road and a very minor mention of water. The ground is mostly dirt and sand with little to no foliage. The area is rocky with a cliff nearby. The topography is flat near the structures. And since the mention of water in this session is very minor, only being perceived from a high altitude, I'm going to discount that perception. In terms of unique non-overlapping elements, there are 5. For the high-risk predictions, we have 5 divided by 11, or a predicted selling price of 45% for Litecoin over its value on the 15th of June, 2018. The low-risk value is 2 over 11, or a Litecoin price that is 18% higher than that which exists on June 15th. The sudden volatility index for Melina's high-price data is little to none, which means that her data show no signs of sudden change in the high price over the forecast period. Moving on to the data for Princess Janae, she perceives open land with extensive foliage, extensive water, with a land-water interface, steep peaks, 2 or 3 structures, a strong sense of undefined movement, and very few subjects, which are perceived as a minor element at best. Since the subjects are described as a minor element, and since the sense of movement is undefined, we will discount both of these. However, they will be used in analyzing other aspects of the predicted price of Litecoin. Thus, for the high-risk prediction, we have 4 divided by 11, or a 36% increase in the price of Litecoin based on the value experienced on June 15th. The low-risk value is 1 divided by 11, or a 9% rise in the price of Litecoin based on its June 15th value. The volatility index for Princess's data suggests very minor sudden volatility in the high price. In terms of Aziz's data, he reports a grassy, natural base surface, perhaps 2 tall, pointy pyramid-type structures, with one of these structures being surrounded by other smaller structures. There are multiple subjects, plus calm and deep water. Some dark clouds are over one of the pyramid structures and what appears to be a whirlpool in the water. For the high-risk prediction, this gives us 6 unique elements, which results in 6 divided by 11, or a rise of 54% of the price of Litecoin relative to the value obtained on the 15th of June. For the low-risk prediction, we have 3 divided by 11, or a 27% rise in the value of Litecoin relative to the 15th of June value. The volatility index for these data suggests moderate to minor sudden volatility in the high price, but there appears to be a threat to the currency high price that is visible during the high price period. But Aziz's data suggests no sudden jumps in the high price. Now, we average the 3 predictions across all viewers, and we have a high-risk predicted value for Litecoin's high price of 45% higher than the starting value for the middle of June. The low-risk average is 18%. Now let's move on to the low price of Litecoin, which involves sessions for targets 2B. Here are the remote viewing sessions that correspond to the low price of Litecoin over the 3-month period from June 15th through September 15th. In the same order as before, we begin with Melina Hall, then Princess Janae, and then Aziz Brown.
Moving on to currency 2B. So I'm getting a lot of mountains in the background, a lot of peaks around. There is water here. Still this land, this sandy, dirt, rocky land. These 2 structures. A lot of cloud dynamics here. Ground vehicles. Subjects here. Subjects are outside of the structure. Now there are a lot of movement leaving from these 2 structures. And I'm also getting a non-surface structure, possibly helicopter or somewhat, flying above this whole area. So here I have my tall structure and my wide structure. A lot of smoke, a lot of dark smoke and clouds are around this whole structure. A lot of smoke here. A lot of subjects leaving out from these 2 structures. Here's the non-surface structure is coming down this way, and I also have the ground vehicle trucks, and these trucks are big trucks, like kind of like construction or army type of trucks, army type of vehicles, but all the subjects are leaving out from these two structures because it's been some type of situation that happened, a lot of clouds, a lot of smoke, a lot of and here's the peaks around, the mountains around, and water is in between these tall mountains and peaks, and just flat land, honestly, from this point on and out. There is little foliage in this area, not too much. It's mostly just sand, dirt, and ground, just rocks. There's a land-water interface, lots of water and more peaks and mountains. This area just seems very natural, more from below, because it's nothing but these two big structures that's kind of far out. So these two structures are sitting on this edge, kind of like, but it's also, it goes down. It's kind of irregular, but it's majority is flat up here, mostly flat on top. Mostly flat on top of this area. And this is what I have for currency 2B.
I'm moving over to currency 2 target B. This target has very wide flat land, water. I hear ocean sounds, a lot of rushing water and ocean-like sounds. Very open land here with a city. There's a mountains in the distance surrounding, like in the background, but surrounding the city, almost like I hear her. There are very few subjects here, men and women. This is an urban environment with, again, surrounding mountains in the background. I see foliage, I see land, man-made smells. I have man-made smells, structures, and the structures are adjacent to one another. They're not separate or spread out like in the last one. It's very foggy or misty in some way, shape, or form here. I definitely see a mist, a cloud dynamic, a fog here. These subjects are a minor element to the target, but I do see them here. I definitely am hearing a lot of ocean sounds and water flowing.
Here there are also two main structures, as well as a land-water interface. Alright, so here we have two main structures, as well as a land-water interface, a beach-like land with water that has a ginormous explosive energy out in the distance of the water. These two structures are different, yet at similar heights. Both seem to be, as well as some other structures out in the distance which are less significant, smaller, both seem to be engulfed to a certain degree with overgrown foliage and natural matter. So this one obviously looks like it's completely covered to the point where it looks like it's just a natural mountain. Feels like that too. There's a dirty texture, like earthy texture to it, as well as some foliage texture. So it just feels like a natural mountain that has a rounded top. Over here, it's much more obvious that it is a man-made structure, far more angular, but it is still covered with a layer of these vines and overgrowth of foliage. Here, we have multiple subjects. These multiple subjects have mannequin-like features. They don't even really seem alive at all. They just seem to have this frozen semi-smile that is this plasticky skin. They seem just like mannequins. Over here, on the other hand, these subjects at the top, with one of them a little bit further, both pairs of subjects, by the way, are staring out at this blast of water. And these ones with this half smile seem completely frozen, while these other ones seem like they are sobbing. They are incredibly sad, in a fit of fearful anxiety, crying, bawling, really, really painful emotions on their face. They just seem like they're in horrible, horrible pain looking up at this experience right here. Inside this water, there seems to be a similar black box as was seen in the other session with the other pyramid-like structures, except instead of a whirlpool, it is catalyzing this furious upheaval of watery energy. And that concludes the perceptions here.
Okay, now let's analyze this based on the perceived essential elements. Melina Hall perceives mountains in the background, water in the background, two structures, ground vehicles, subjects outside on a road, a non-surface structure, smoke and heat from one of the structures, and very little foliage. We will discount the foliage since it is a minor element at best. This gives us 7 primary elements, which is 7 divided by 11, or a high-risk drop of 64% relative to the price that Litecoin obtained on the 15th of June. The low-risk estimate is 36%. The volatility index for Melina's data suggests moderate sudden volatility to the low price. Moving on to the data obtained by Princess Janae, she perceives an urban area with multiple structures placed closely together on wide flat land near water. Thus, she perceives water. Also, she perceives mountains in the distance and foliage on land. There are very few subjects which she reports as unimportant to the target, which we will discount in the analysis. Thus, we have 4 primary elements, which yields a high-risk drop in the price of Litecoin relative to its value on the 15th of June of 36%. The low-risk value is 9%. There is no indication of significant sudden volatility in the low price for Princess's data. Now, just to be clear, this does not say that Princess's data suggests no sudden volatility will occur. Rather, the potential for sudden volatility is not observed in her data. With remote viewing, the absence of something in the data does not mean that it does not or will not exist. Rather, it means that the element was not perceived. To decide on whether or not something exists or will exist, we rely on the combined data for a number of remote viewers. Finally, Aziz reports perceiving land and water, explosive energetics in the water, subjects, a sandy base surface, 2 tall structures with rounded or pointy tops and rough and overgrown textures, which could be man-made or natural, a tall boxy structure with both male and female subjects on the top of the structure. Finally, Aziz reports that most of the structures seem overgrown with foliage. The high-risk value for Aziz's data is 6 divided by 11, or a 54% drop in the price of Litecoin relative to its June 15th value. The low-risk value is 3 divided by 11, or a 27% drop in the price. The volatility index for Aziz's data indicate very significant sudden changes with respect to the low price of Litecoin during the forecast period. Now, we average the 3 predictions across all viewers, and we have a high-risk predicted value for Litecoin's low price of 51% lower than the starting value for the middle of June. The low-risk value is a 24% drop relative to the June 15th value. On average, these data suggest moderate to severe sudden volatility in the low price of Litecoin, which suggests that some of the drops in the Litecoin price could be rapid during the forecast period. If we compare the high and low price dynamics for Litecoin over this forecast period across all remote viewers, the overall indication is that the downward pressure on the price of Litecoin will dominate. This will be accompanied by one or more sudden movements in lowering the price. The threats to the price of Litecoin will be visible during the times when the high price is established, and there will be no sudden jumps in the upward direction of the price. Rather, the sudden movements will surround the downward direction. This looks like this forecast period will be a bit rough for Litecoin. These data do not indicate if the high price will occur before or after the low price. Just the prices themselves over the forecast period are the focus of the predictions. While some investors would obviously like to know the timing of the predicted price changes, it is still very worthwhile to know the predicted values themselves, even in the absence of the timing. With these grounding magnitudes in mind, investors should be able to have a better sense of the market movements as the forecast period proceeds. Based on these data, if one was to buy low and sell high, a relatively conservative strategy would be to consider buying once the Litecoin price drops to around 24% of its value obtained on June 15th, and sell once the value rises to around 18% higher than its June 15th value. Care should be taken to observe rapid price changes affecting the low price. Our data suggest that will happen. Understand that the theory being employed here is the same for both the low-risk and high-risk predictions. Targets that are more complicated, which means that they have more elements, are indicative of higher magnitude changes in the Litecoin pricing over the forecast period. Targets with fewer elements are indicative of less change over the forecast period. The levels of change and sudden volatility are determined at the close of the forecast period, which in turn determines the actual complexity of the remote viewing targets that are perceived by the remote viewers prior to the beginning of the forecast period. Also, as we continue to do more of these forecasts, we will gain greater accuracy in separating the low-risk numbers from the high-risk numbers, and in particular, our forecasts published in September and onward will benefit from the evaluations of our summer forecasts, which, in theory, will lead to increasing accuracy in our future forecasts. Again, no one at Farsight is a licensed financial advisor. This is an experiment, and there are no explicit or implied guarantees of any sort in this report, and any investors buying and selling in cryptocurrencies are of course doing so at their own risk. This report is made for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nonetheless, I do personally look forward to the time when people notice how accurate these predictions are, and we will have to just wait and see when that happens. I want to also add that those of you who watch our forecast during the forecast period are essentially investing in making our forecasting project possible. It costs us a significant amount of money to make these forecasts, and without your support, we could not do this. So you are supporting us on the front line, so to speak, giving us the means to advance this forecasting technology. I want to thank you for your support. Meanwhile, we will have our next report out in mid-July, and that report will be for Ethereum. We will again make our predictions for a 3-month forecast. May you follow your own intuitions, make wise investment decisions, and become rich. Thank you for following our activities at Farsight. I am Courtney Brown, Director of the Farsight Institute.